It had been raining steadily for 4 days, and the question of whether the fete would go ahead on Saturday was constantly up for discussion at the family dinner table. I was about 12 and very excited about the event taking place in the hospital grounds where we lived, as my dad was the Chief Executive Officer. I was the strongest proponent of going ahead, whatever the weather. Saturday dawned and the rain continued. "Oh, they'll have to call it off," said Mum. "The ground is far too boggy." "No, they won't," I said, eternally optimistic. "I know what we'll do," said Dad, who, to quote that wonderful line from The Castle, had always been an ideas man. "We'll move the fete from outside on the lawn to inside in the hospital roof space." The volunteer set-up crew readily agreed. So at 6 a.m, the full-scale operation of moving the contents of 20 stalls, soft drink machines, fairy floss makers, public address systems, and all of the paraphernalia required for a successful fundraiser began. My mum and sister were in charge of the cake stall, carrying what they had already stored at home to the hospital and up in the lift. My dad and brother were wheeling trolleys of soft drink boxes to and fro and carrying the bags of ice necessary to keep them cool. The family tradition of all hands on deck was deeply ingrained in me, and I was desperate to help. But that would be a challenge for a blind 12-year-old, where the environment was wet, muddy, and things were constantly shifting. My face fell further and further as one after another of the set-up crew told me that there wasn't anything that I could do. As it had done often in the past, and would do again and again during my life, my dad's warm hand on my shoulder saved the day. "There's more than enough jobs for everyone today," he said. "The only puzzle is working out which one you can do. And I've solved the puzzle. Come and drive the lift." The lift was the pinch point for the whole operation. Everything and everyone going up to the fete had to go up in the lift. And due to the high demand from the ground floor and from the roof itself, it was constantly tripping out and causing delays. "I'm going to override the automatic system and put this on manual, and I want you to drive it," Dad said to me. "If this lift doesn't keep going, we won't have a fete." I couldn't have been prouder. I stood 2 centimetres taller and spent the next 12 hours driving that lift, eating and drinking while going up and down, and strategically selecting quiet times for rushed toilet breaks. No one else was touching those controls. There was no way I was letting down my dad or risking the fete not going ahead. This story encapsulates my book and my life. It shows me learning from my parents that I was not the kid who was blind, but an integral part of a functioning family unit. Understanding that we, with our Christian values and ethics, and as well-off members of Australian society, had a social obligation to support those not so fortunate. And knowing that achieving success, as Grandma used to say, was 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration. I learned from my family that most things could be achieved. The challenge was finding a way. So thanks for the chance to talk to you today about my book, Finding a Way. I share memories of 60 years on the planet. Happy memories of love and support, tough memories of discrimination, challenges and failures, and positive memories of achievement. And I share the unique experience of a life without one sense, but with heightened awareness of the information gained through others. I also share the advocacy for change for disadvantaged people, people who are same-sex attracted or gender diverse, people from different cultural and linguistic backgrounds, asylum seekers, and people with disabilities, which has been a constant companion in my life. I've woven stories throughout the book because I've learned that not only are stories the way we develop and pass down our culture, but they are also what remain in people's memories, whether they are told by voices in the ear, words on a page, images on a screen, or a combination of all of those. And if you get a laugh from one of my stories or find useful a piece of wisdom that I've gained, then that means the book will have been a success. Because I've learned the value of telling stories, I sat down to tell mine, weaving my passion for advocacy and equality into the life which I've enjoyed, the rich life that I've enjoyed. And I've always been readily able to laugh, both at myself and others, and I've tried to share this sense of fun throughout the pages of my book. I've also tried to share the lessons that I've learned in life. At the beginning, I was a little bit overwhelmed with the idea of writing 80 to 100,000 words. But then Maureen, my wife and journalist, said, well, it's 40 speeches and you've written hundreds of them. So I wrote it that way, in little 2,000 word sections. Writing was a happy process as I sat and recalled the memories of my life. Of course, my life has had its challenges. Who of us, particularly people who are blind or vision impaired, have not had those? But overall, I've had 60 years of enjoyment on the planet, and I wrote about that. As writers do, I got stuck several times. But, as she often does, my teenage daughter, 19-year-old daughter, Rachel, fixed that problem for me. Knowing me very well, she said, I'll take your iPhone away each day until you've written a chapter. And that worked an absolute treat. I wrote as fast as I could so that I could get back to social media. I wrote the book in Braille, the script that I've used all my life. And, being committed as I am to equality of access to all materials for Braille readers, I'm very proud to have made the Braille version available at the same time as the print version. I only wish that that happened in far more school classrooms. The physical difference, though, is stark. While the print book, and there's some of them on the table out the back, up the back, is the standard size, the Braille version arrives in 5 volumes. But so that you disadvantaged readers of print did not miss out, we put some Braille on the cover of the print version as well. Whilst talking about the cover, I've received some very positive compliments about the attractive picture on the front of the book. I'm talking, of course, of my previous guide dog, Arrow, but the bloke with her on the cover doesn't look too bad either. And I've really appreciated the endorsements written by a number of people who I admire very much. Peter Fitzsimons, Wendy Harmer, Ron McCallum, and who have I forgotten? Angela Caterns. So let me end with a story that's not from my book, but it's a story from a man called Fred Schroeder, who's an American man who was just elected president of the World Blind Union a week or two ago. Fred lost some of his sight at the age of about 7, and the rest around 16. He learned Braille and orientation and mobility as we do, and was starting to adjust to living as a blind person. But he was very aware of how society limits us and how the impact of our blindness is significantly increased by what I refer to as the soft bigotry of low expectations. He told the story of meeting another blind person, and they chatted for a while, and Fred needed to call this man the next week. I'll give you my phone number so you can call, said the man. Oh, said Fred, you can't do that because I can't write it down. But you've learned Braille, haven't you? Said the man. Oh yes, said Fred, but I don't have a slate and stylus with me. The man responded, well, Fred, if you can see, you don't always need to carry a pen with you, because there will always be someone else who's sighted around from whom you can borrow a pen. But this is not the case when you're blind. You can't borrow a slate and stylus on most occasions, or a Braille note taker. So you have to carry it with you and be prepared. Fred and I learned several lessons from this man and from this story. First, that Fred should always carry something to take a note. And that's a really important lesson for all of you who are blind or vision impaired. Second, that many people would have responded by writing down the number for Fred and telling him later, or by calling Fred instead. And by doing that, they would have reinforced Fred's helplessness. What this man did was said, "Lift your game, Fred." And the third lesson is that as a blind person, you can choose to rely on others and continue to be less effective, or you can go out and rely on yourself. And my advice, always carry that note taker. Fred's story isn't my story, but it makes the same point that I make in the book and throughout the book. For parents, don't treat your child who is blind or vision impaired as a special child. And I use that word special with all the negative connotations it has in the disability sector. Rather, treat them as you treat their brothers and sisters. Now, this might mean a few scraped shins, a few bruised foreheads, and a few disappointments, but it will also mean that they won't be limited in their opportunities. And as a blind person, you play the hand that you're dealt the best way you can. You don't sit in the corner and feel sad that you can't see those things that you'd like to see. You go out and do the best you can with what you've got. And thirdly, the most important support as a person who's blind or vision impaired that you can get is the peer support that you can gain from other people who are blind and vision impaired. Because we're the ones who get it. We're the ones who understand the challenges that you're facing. And we're the ones that have worked out the life hacks that you can use to reduce the impact of your disability. And that's why I'm president of Blind Citizens New South Wales, because I want to give back the peer support that I received as a young blind person from other blind people. My book tells many more stories of my adult life, my adventures throughout the world, and advocacy activities. And yes, of course, there's some pretty funny guide dog stories in there as well. When my publisher Alex told me that the book was printed and ready for launch, I was both scared and excited. It's a scary process to share your writing and your life story and hope that people will like it. But at the same time, I was very excited to share it with all of you. As a person who can't see, I do have to find a way when I travel. And I've done a lot of that during my life. But the title of this book means far more than that. Finding a way is what I do. If I can't achieve what I want to in one way, I simply find another.